It was a peaceful, sunlit afternoon in one of Chicago's quiet neighborhoods. Residents walked their dogs, enjoying the stillness of the day, and the streets felt calm, serene even. Among them was an older man, dressed in a sharp black suit, strolling slowly down the sidewalk. His name was Benjamin Harris, 67 years old. Though he no longer served as a United States Senator, Benjamin had earned the respect of everyone around him through years of service and wisdom. He had worked hard for his position, and the community regarded him with admiration. On this ordinary afternoon, though, he wasn't thinking about politics or laws. He was simply taking a walk, savoring the peacefulness of the neighborhood he had lived in for so many years. He had always considered this place safe, a place where people didn't feel the need to look over their shoulders. But like all things, safety is an illusion, and this particular afternoon was about to shatter that illusion for good. As Benjamin walked along, he heard the faint hum of a police car engine behind him. When he turned his head, he saw a cruiser slowly pulling up. The car stopped just a few feet away from him, and Officer Douglas Tilford, an officer known for his harsh demeanor, stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, and imposing, Tilford's reputation was one of a man quick to judge and eager to use his power. In this neighborhood, people knew to avoid him whenever possible. And today, it seemed, Benjamin was in his sights. "Hey, you!" Tilford's voice cut through the silence, sharp and accusatory. He approached Benjamin, his boots hitting the pavement with force. Benjamin, unfazed, turned to face him, his expression calm but curious. "Yes, officer, can I help you?" Tilford's eyes scanned him from head to toe, the suspicion in his gaze unmistakable. "What's a guy like you doing in this neighborhood? You look out of place. Drugs? Stolen property?" Benjamin was taken aback. What did this officer think he was? But he didn't let his surprise show. He simply responded, "I live here. I'm just taking a walk. Is there a problem?" Tilford's eyes narrowed, not satisfied. He didn't seem to care about Benjamin's words. His gaze remained locked on Benjamin's face, searching for any hint of guilt. "Let me see your ID," he barked, folding his arms like a man daring Benjamin to refuse. Without hesitation, Benjamin reached into his jacket, pulling out his wallet slowly to avoid alarming the officer. He handed over his ID, his fingers steady. "Here you go. I'm Senator Benjamin Harris." Tilford barely glanced at the ID. He didn't care about Benjamin's title, his history, or his accomplishments. The officer's attitude remained hostile. "Senator, huh?" Tilford scoffed, clearly unimpressed. "What's a senator doing walking around here? Think your title's gonna get you out of trouble?" By now, a few neighbors had started to take notice. Some peered out from behind their windows, while others stood at a distance, watching in silence. A couple of them even pulled out their phones, sensing that this might escalate into something more. Benjamin could feel the tension building. He was no stranger to confrontation, but this felt different. This wasn't just any altercation, it was his neighborhood. This was his community, but the officer before him didn't seem to care about that. "I don't want any trouble, officer," Benjamin said, his patience wearing thin. "I'm just trying to get home." But Tilford wasn't finished. He took a step closer, his hand hovering near his holster. The officer's words grew more venomous. "I've seen plenty of your kind. Always thinking you're above the law. Well, not today." The air was thick with tension. Benjamin stood his ground, knowing that one wrong move could send the situation spiraling out of control. But his resolve remained strong. "Step back, officer," he said, in a firm tone, keeping his hands visible. "I'm not a threat to you." Tilford's eyes burned with a mix of rage and pride. He stepped even closer, his hand brushing the handle of his gun. Benjamin's breath quickened, but he refused to back down. "You think you're smarter than me?" Tilford spat. "Think your fancy suit and your title are going to get you out of this?" Benjamin's mind raced. He knew exactly how quickly things could escalate. He had faced worse before, but this was different. He was in his own neighborhood, and this was supposed to be a place of safety. Just as the situation reached its boiling point, there was a sudden shift. A black car with government plates pulled up, breaking the tension like a thunderclap. A tall, sharply dressed man stepped out. Without hesitation, he walked straight toward Officer Tilford, his presence commanding attention. "What's going on here?" the man demanded, his voice deep and filled with authority. Tilford didn't answer. He kept his focus on Benjamin, the gun still pointed directly at him. The man stepped forward, flashing a badge with the Senate emblem on it. "I'm Special Agent Richard Palmer, assigned to Senator Harris," he said, his voice unwavering. "Put your weapon down, now." Tilford's eyes flickered between Palmer and the gun aimed at Benjamin. "This man's not a senator," he muttered, his voice shaky. "This is some kind of trick." Agent Palmer didn't blink. "That man you've got a gun pointed at is Senator Benjamin Harris," he said, his voice sharp. "And you are dangerously close to making the biggest mistake of your career." The crowd watched in stunned silence, phones recording every second of the confrontation. The tension in the air was almost unbearable. Tilford's hands wavered, his grip tightening on the gun, but something in his eyes began to shift. Was starting to realize the gravity of his mistake. Palmer didn't give him a chance to reconsider. "You're on camera, officer," he said, nodding toward the onlookers. "Do you really want to be the man who shot a senator in broad daylight?" Tilford hesitated, his fingers still resting on the trigger. But as the seconds passed, doubt crept into his mind. Slowly, his hand wavered, and then, with visible reluctance, he lowered the gun. The collective breath of the crowd was released in unison as the immediate threat passed. Agent Palmer stepped forward, his voice cutting through the remaining tension. "Officer Tilford, you're relieved of duty. Hand over your badge and weapon." Tilford's face went pale. "What? You can't do this," he protested, but the force of Palmer's gaze was unwavering. "You pointed a loaded weapon at a senator without cause," Palmer said, his tone final. "You will face the consequences of your actions. Now, hand over your badge." Tilford stood frozen for a moment, disbelief and anger evident in his eyes. But the reality of the situation set in. Reluctantly, he unclipped his badge and handed it over, his voice quiet with defeat. "You'll regret this," he muttered, but the words felt hollow. Palmer turned to Benjamin, his gaze softer now. "Senator Harris, are you all right?" Benjamin nodded, his face calm. "I'm fine, thank you, Richard." By now, the police chief had arrived, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "Senator Harris, I am so sorry for this," he said, his voice strained. Benjamin met his gaze calmly. "I appreciate your apology, Chief, but this isn't just about me. It's about how certain officers treat people in this country. This should never have happened." The crowd murmured in agreement. This incident had shaken them to their core. It could have been any one of them. As Tilford was led away, the chief turned back to Benjamin. "Rest assured, Senator, there will be an investigation. Officer Tilford will face the consequences." Benjamin nodded, his expression still unreadable. Justice had been swift today. For the first time in a long while, he felt that his neighborhood was safe once more. As the crowd dispersed, still buzzing with shock and relief, Benjamin continued his walk home, knowing that things were changing again, that perhaps, just perhaps, the system was beginning to listen.